The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, turning the low clouds above Kimballton Airfield into bands of bruised purple and gray. The grass along the perimeter was slick with dew, and every breath came out in mist as ground crews moved among the parked aircraft, their boots crunching against frost-hardened soil. The cold English morning was alive with motion, men shouting over the rumble of engines warming up, tools clanging against metal, and the smell of fuel and burnt oil thick in the air. In the center of the commotion stood a row of B-17 flying fortresses, great four-engine bombers gleaming faintly beneath the rising sun. They looked indestructible, silver giants waiting to take flight. But everyone who worked around them knew better. These planes might look like fortresses, but the sky over Europe had turned even steel into dust. Captain Richard "Rick" Callahan stood beneath his ship, the Mary Jane II, studying her like a father looks at a wounded child. She'd taken flak damage on her last mission. Patched holes still showed along her right wing, and the skin beneath her fuselage was pitted from shrapnel. Yet she was ready again, ready to fly. Her nose art, a dark-haired woman in a flight jacket astride a falling bomb, was fresh and bright against the dull aluminum skin. Beneath it, the name Mary Jane II was painted in red cursive, bold and defiant.
"Morning, Skipper," said Sergeant George Latham, the flight engineer, climbing down from the top hatch with grease stains on his jacket. "Engines are primed. Fuel mix is good. She'll fly."
"She better," Callahan muttered. He ran his gloved hand along the nose, tracing the painted curves of the pinup girl's smile. "Let's bring her home again, Georgie." In the ready room, 10 men sat together in half-lit silence. The smell of stale coffee and cigarette smoke clung to the air. A chalkboard at the front of the room bore their orders in neat white script. Target: Daimler-Benz engine plant, Essen, Ruhr Valley. Conditions: heavy flak expected. The Ruhr. Every man in the 8th Air Force knew that word. It was the heart of Germany's industrial machine and the most dangerous patch of sky in Europe. Callahan stood before them, flight jacket zipped to his neck, clipboard in hand. He wasn't tall, but there was a quiet authority in the way he spoke. His Oklahoma drawl softened none of his words.
"All right, boys," he began. "Same formation as last time. We fly in position red 3. Keep tight, no stragglers. Our job is to hit those engine factories, then get our asses back here in one piece. You know the drill."
Lieutenant Mark Red Harris, his co-pilot, grinned weakly through the cigarette smoke. "Same plan, different hellhole." "Pretty much." Callahan cracked a faint smile. "Now, remember, once we hit the IP, the Krauts will be waiting. They'll throw everything they've got at us. Stay on your guns. No cowboy stuff." The navigator, Lieutenant Charlie West, lifted his head. "Weather reports say crosswinds over the channel. We might drift north on the return." "Then correct for it. I don't want to swim home." That earned a low chuckle from the crew, the brief, brittle humor of men who'd seen too much sky and too many empty bunks after missions. When the briefing ended, Callahan pulled on his flight gloves and helmet, then walked out to the flight line. The rising sun had turned the bombers into silhouettes against a blazing sky. Engines began to roar, one after another, until the entire field vibrated with thunder. The B-17s came alive, props spinning, exhaust coughing black smoke before settling into a deep, rhythmic growl. Callahan climbed into the cockpit. The familiar smell of leather, fuel, and cold metal wrapped around him like an old jacket. Harris was already at his side, running checks. "Battery on," Harris said. "Fuel selectors to main," Callahan replied. "Mixture rich. Props full forward. Brakes set, let's wake her up." Latham's voice came through the intercom from the top turret. "Clear 1." The first prop spun, then another.
The 4 Wright Cyclone engines coughed, sputtered, and came roaring to life one by one. The entire plane shuddered with power. The vibrations rolled through the deck plates, through the seats, through the bones of every man aboard. The smell of burning oil filled the cockpit. Latham called out from above, "All greens across the board. She's purring, Skipper." "Good. Let's get in line." Outside, the control tower gave the signal. Callahan eased the throttle, taxiing Mary Jane II into position behind 2 other bombers. The engine's low thunder mixed with the squeal of tires against tarmac. The sight was mesmerizing. Endless ranks of silver fortresses rolling forward, their wings overlapping like a flock of mechanical birds preparing to take the sky by storm. "Hold on tight," Callahan said. "Here we go." The throttles went forward. The 4 engines roared in unison. The runway blurred beneath them. The fortress gathered speed, wheels bouncing against the earth before finally lifting, heavy and majestic, into the gray morning. The English countryside fell away, patchwork fields fading beneath the clouds. At 5,000 feet, Callahan leveled off and turned east, joining formation with dozens of others. The sky filled with B-17s, hundreds of them, their silver bellies reflecting sunlight through the mist. The air shook under the combined power of thousands of engines. The radio crackled to life. "Red Squadron, form up tight. Maintain spacing. We're heading for the Ruhr. God help us." At 25,000 feet, the air thinned and the temperature dropped. Frost crept along the inside of the cockpit glass. The crew donned their oxygen masks. Below them, the North Sea stretched like polished steel, calm and cold. "Crossing the coast now," the navigator called. "Welcome to France." Almost immediately, black puffs appeared ahead, flak bursts growing thicker as they advanced. The Germans had radar-guided guns here, and they knew the bomber's altitude to the foot. "Flak ahead," Harris called. The first blast rocked the plane. Shrapnel clanged against the fuselage, sparking off the metal. The crew cursed over the intercom. Another explosion erupted closer, then another. "Hold formation," Callahan ordered, gripping the yoke tight. "Don't you dare break!" Through the cockpit windows, he could see other B-17s shimmering in the haze. Then one took a direct hit. The explosion bloomed orange. Then the bomber vanished in a rolling fireball. Pieces of wing spun past the Mary Jane II, whirling like leaves in the wind. "Jesus Christ," Harris whispered. "Eyes forward," Callahan said grimly. "Keep flying." Then came the fighters. Dark specks appeared against the sun, growing larger by the second. The Germans were fast. Me-109s and FW-190s diving from above, sunlight glinting off their wings. "Bandits incoming! High 2 o'clock!" Latham shouted. The top turret roared to life, twin 50-caliber guns blazing. Tracers arced across the sky. The gunners in the waist and tail joined in, filling the air with fire. The first 109 exploded in a cloud of smoke and debris. The crew cheered, but victory lasted only a heartbeat. A 20mm shell slammed into the right wing. The No. 3 engine burst into flames. Oil sprayed across the fuselage. "Engine 3's hit! Fire!" Latham yelled. "Feather it," Callahan ordered, his voice calm but cold. "Cut the fuel. Get that fire out." Latham twisted the levers, and the propeller blades shifted into neutral, the roaring flame fading to smoke. But the hits kept coming. Flak hammered them from below. Fighters strafed from above. The sky was a living storm. "Bomb bay doors open," the bombardier, Lieutenant Tom Hensley, called out. "Target in sight." "Steady," Callahan said. "Hold her steady." Steady. Then the world exploded. A direct hit beneath the fuselage. The number 2 engine tore from its mount, tumbling away in flames. The bomb bay doors warped from the blast. "Jesus, we're hit again!" Harris shouted. "Drop the load, Tom!" Callahan yelled. "Bombs away!" The payload tumbled into the chaos below. Moments later, the sky over Essen erupted, the factory engulfed in fire and smoke. "Target destroyed," Hensley said through gritted teeth. "Good. Now let's get the hell out of here." The Fortress turned west, but she was wounded, 2 engines dead, control cables half cut, and the sky still filled with death. Through the smoke and fire, Callahan set his jaw, gripping the yoke until his knuckles went white. "We're not dying here," he said quietly. "Not today." And with that, Mary Jane II, bleeding, burning, and battered, began her impossible journey home. The Mary Jane II staggered out of the Ruhr like a dying bird, her wings smoking and her engines howling unevenly. The air around her was chaos, the remnants of the formation scattering under relentless fire, the sky torn open by flak bursts and tracer streams. What had begun as a majestic procession of silver bombers had dissolved into fragments, broken wings glinting against the sunlight. Inside the cockpit, the noise was beyond deafening, a mechanical roar mixed with the wind screaming through holes in the fuselage. The instrument panel flickered with dying lights, and black smoke curled along the ceiling. Callahan gripped the control yoke with both hands, sweat freezing on his forehead despite the sub-zero cold. "Number 2's gone completely," Sergeant Latham reported from the top turret, coughing through the intercom. "3's dead, 4's coughing blood. We're running on 1 engine, Skipper, and she ain't happy." "Keep her alive," Callahan snapped. "Feather the rest. Conserve what's left." The co-pilot, Harris, leaned forward, his face pale beneath his oxygen mask. "We're losing formation. Everyone's pulling ahead." "Let 'em," Callahan said grimly. "We'd only slow them down. Our fight's here now." The bomber shook again as another near miss burst off her left wingtip. Flak shrapnel sliced through the fuselage like knives, rattling down the length of the plane. The waist gunners cursed and ducked instinctively as sparks showered over them. "Waist's clear," came the voice of Corporal Jenkins, the left gunner. "No fires here, but we're Swiss cheese back here, Cap'n." "Keep your guns hot," Callahan said. "They'll be coming for us." And they did. The Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, sensing easy prey, peeled from the clouds and came in fast. The sun caught their canopies for a brief moment before they dove, sleek black arrows of death. Tracers streaked across the sky, red and white lines slicing past the bomber. "Bandits! 6 o'clock low!" Wilcox, the tail gunner, shouted, his voice shaking. The 50 cals roared to life. Brass casings spilled across the floor as Wilcox tracked the lead fighter. "Come on, you bastard!" He squeezed the trigger. "Got him! He's smoking! He's—" A sudden burst of cannon fire ripped through the tail assembly. The intercom filled with static and a strangled scream. "Wilcox! Tail! Report!" Silence. "God damn it, Wilcox! Report!" Nothing. The radio operator, Sergeant Blake, climbed back toward the tail, struggling through twisted metal and dangling wires. When he reached it, he stopped dead. The entire tail section was shredded, riddled with holes the size of fists, blood frozen in black streaks against the walls. He didn't need to say anything when he returned. The look in his eyes told them everything. Harris slammed his fist against the console. "We can't keep this up, Rick. We've lost half the ship." Callahan's jaw tightened. "We're not turning back. We make the channel, then we decide." "Make the channel?" Harris barked a bitter laugh. "We'll be lucky if we make another 10 minutes." But Callahan ignored him. His hands stayed locked on the controls, steady as stone.
Outside, the right wing burned sluggishly, the flame trailing behind them like a banner of smoke. The bombardier, Hensley, crawled forward, blood matting his hair. Bomb bay doors won't close, hydraulic lines are shot. Then we close them by hand. We need every ounce of lift. The men worked in silence, shouting orders over the shriek of the wind. Latham crawled across the catwalk, flames licking below his boots as he hauled the doors shut with a chain and a length of cable. His gloves burned through, his fingers blackened, but he didn't stop. When it was done, he collapsed beside Callahan, gasping. "That's it, Skipper. I'm out of miracles." "You've got one more in you," Callahan said, eyes never leaving the horizon. "We all do." The fortress limped westward. The sky around them was empty now. No friendlies, no formation, just the wounded hulk of a bomber bleeding across enemy airspace. Below, fields rolled past, tiny villages blurred by altitude and haze. German soldiers looked up, pointing at the trail of smoke carving the heavens. "Navigator," Callahan said, "give me a heading." Lieutenant West hunched over his charts, the compass jittering wildly. "We're off course, heading southwest. I can correct, but—" "Do it. Plot for the channel, any direction that isn't Germany." The radio operator tapped his headset. "Radio's dead, sir. Antenna's gone. We're on our own." Callahan nodded grimly. "Then we stay quiet and pray no one sees us." But prayers went unanswered that day. A shadow crossed the cockpit canopy, another Focke-Wulf swooping in for the kill. The nose guns flared, bullets hammering across the fuselage. Glass shattered, gauges exploded in sparks. Latham spun the top turret and fired back, the twin barrels roaring. He caught the fighter in the nose. The German plane blossomed into flame and tumbled past, trailing smoke like a comet. "That's 3 I've bagged today," Latham wheezed. "Make that 4 if you count the one that scared me to death." "Save your ammo," Callahan said. "We're not out of Germany yet." They flew low now, skimming the clouds. Each minute bled into the next, time stretching thin. The wind howled through holes in the skin of the plane, and the bitter cold gnawed at their bones. Inside the fuselage, men shifted silently, some bleeding, all exhausted. The oxygen system was gone, the thin air made their heads pound. "Skipper," Latham said finally, his voice quieter now. "Number 4's about to blow. Oil pressure's at 0, temps climbing past 300. Feather it. That'll leave us with 1. Then 1's all we need." The engineer hesitated, then followed the order. The propeller slowed, stilled, and locked. The only sound left was the thundering labor of the number 1 engine, the last beating heart of the Mary Jane II. Minutes later, even that began to sputter. The engine coughed, backfired, and let out a plume of black smoke. "Rick," Harris said softly, "she's dying." Callahan didn't answer. He kept one hand on the yoke, the other steady on the throttle. "Not yet," he said, "not till we see the sea." The last engine choked and died. The propeller spun to a halt. The noise faded, replaced by the eerie rush of wind. The cockpit was filled with silence, a silence so heavy it pressed on their ears. "Engines are all dead," Latham said, disbelief in his tone. "All 4." But somehow, impossibly, the plane didn't fall. The fortress continued to glide, nose tilted slightly down, wings steady in the air. "We're still flying," Harris whispered. "How the hell?" "Don't question it," Callahan said. "Just hold her." Below them, the land began to change. The forests gave way to rivers, the rivers to wide plains. The Rhine shimmered in the distance, winding silver through the haze. They were crossing out of the worst of it now. "Altitude's dropping," Latham warned.
2,000 feet and falling. Keep her level, Callahan said. We'll ride her as long as she'll glide. And she did. For nearly an hour, Mary Jane II floated across Germany without power, her wings trembling, her fuselage creaking, the wounded metal somehow holding together. The crew moved in silence, afraid to speak, as though words alone might break the fragile spell keeping them aloft. Then, through the clouds ahead, a formation of dots appeared, smaller, sleeker shapes cutting toward them. "More fighters," Harris whispered. The gray waters of the North Sea stretched out ahead, endless and cold. The Mary Jane II drifted toward it like a dying leviathan, gliding just beneath the clouds. Her skin was blackened from fire, her wings pitted and torn, smoke trailing like a ghostly banner across the sky. The four propellers, once the thunderous heart of a fortress, hung motionless. The bomber should not have been flying. Gravity should have claimed her minutes ago. But still she held the air, stubbornly defying the inevitable. "Altitude 1,200 feet, Latham muttered, his voice hoarse. "Dropping steady. We've got maybe 10 minutes before she runs out of lift." 10 minutes, Callahan repeated quietly. His hands were locked on the yoke, his knuckles white. Every muscle in his arms burned from holding the weight of the plane steady. "That's all we need." The Mustang escort stayed close, circling protectively. Their leader, callsign Falcon 1, flew so near that Callahan could see his eyes behind the oxygen mask, scanning the crippled bomber with disbelief. "Jesus, Fortress!" Falcon's voice crackled over the emergency frequency. "You look like hell it spat you back out." "Feels like it," Callahan rasped. "You boys got eyes on home?" "Affirmative. You're 20 miles off the coast. England's right ahead, just past that fog bank. Hold her steady, old girl. You're almost there." Callahan didn't answer. He couldn't. Every ounce of concentration was focused on the controls. The plane wanted to dive. The nose kept dipping lower, the airspeed bleeding away. He could feel the weight of the men behind him, wounded, freezing, silent. Inside the fuselage, the air reeked of oil, burnt metal, and blood. Blake, the radio operator, was bent over a half-broken transmitter, trying in vain to get a signal out. Hensley, the bombardier, had tied his arm with a strip of parachute silk to slow the bleeding. Latham was still at his post in the top turret, his gloved hands resting on the smoking barrels of his guns. They all knew there was nothing left to shoot at, but it was easier to hold the grips than to admit defeat. "Navigator," Callahan said. "Course check." West leaned over his chart. His pencil shook as he traced their path. "We're dead on. If the wind holds, we'll hit the coast near Dover." "Good. Keep it that way." Another silence fell. Only the faint rush of air filled the bomber now, that and the occasional groan of tortured metal. Every creak sounded like the prelude to disaster. Then Harris broke the quiet. "Rick, we're losing her." The nose dipped again, this time steeper. The altimeter spun down. "Come on, baby," Callahan whispered through gritted teeth. "Not yet." He eased the yoke back. The plane shuddered violently, threatening to stall. For a terrifying moment, it seemed she would roll and break apart. Then the wings leveled again. 700 feet, Latham warned. "That's it. Any lower and we're swimming." "Not if we can see land," Callahan said. But even as he said it, the clouds ahead thickened into a dense gray wall. Fog rolled in from the channel, swallowing the horizon. The Mustangs disappeared into it one by one. "Falcon 1, we've lost visual," Harris called over the radio. "We still got you on radar," came the reply, faint through the static. "Keep straight and true. Don't turn. You're almost there." The cockpit filled with ghostly white mist.
Visibility dropped to nothing. The world became sound and motion alone. The wind, the faint creak of the fuselage, the steady breath of the men holding their nerve. And then, without warning, the bomber lurched.
Metal screamed as the left wing twisted under the strain. A section of the outer flap tore free and spun into the fog. The sudden imbalance threw the aircraft into a slow roll. Harris grabbed the yoke, helping Callahan wrestle it back level. "Wings given out!" Latham shouted. "Hold her!" Callahan barked. "Trim with what's left!"
They fought the controls with everything they had. The plane bucked and shuddered, nose pitching down. The altimeter dropped past 500 feet.
"Rick!" Harris yelled. "We're done! She's going in!"
"Not while I'm flying," Callahan hissed. He forced the yoke back, his whole body trembling. His vision narrowed. His arms felt like lead. Then, through the mist, something appeared. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A glimmer of light.
"Coast!" West shouted. "I see the coast!"
They burst from the fog like a ghost from another world. Below them stretched the chalk cliffs of Dover, brilliant white against the dark sea, and beyond the green fields of England. The men cheered, a ragged, disbelieving sound that filled the cabin. Even Harris let out a shaky laugh. "We made it," he whispered. "God help me, we made it!" But Callahan wasn't done yet. The bomber was dropping fast, too fast. He scanned the instruments, airspeed 130, altitude falling through 400 feet. No power, no hydraulics, and only half a wing left. "Find me a field," he ordered. West pressed his face to the glass. "There, near the cliffs. Looks clear." "Good, that's our runway." He adjusted the flaps, what was left of them, and angled the descent. The plane groaned in protest. Pieces of fuselage rattled loose and fell away. The starboard aileron snapped with a sharp crack. "Brace for impact!" Harris shouted over the intercom. The men gripped whatever they could. The Mary Jane II came in low, skimming the cliff tops. The English coast blurred beneath her. The landing gear was useless, blown apart hours ago, so Callahan brought her down belly first. The first touch was like a hammer blow. The belly scraped across the grass, throwing up a storm of dirt and debris. The left wing hit a fence, shearing off entirely. Sparks cascaded across the fuselage. Inside, men were tossed like rag dolls. The nose crumpled, the tail snapped, but still the bomber slid, slowing, groaning, until finally, mercifully, she stopped. For a long time, no one moved. Only the soft hiss of cooling metal and the crackle of a small fire broke the silence. Then someone coughed. Latham. "Everybody still in one piece?" he croaked. One by one, voices answered. "Yeah. Still here. Arms busted, but breathing. Tail's gone again, but so am I." Harris laughed weakly. "You're all insane." "Comes with the job," Latham muttered. Callahan finally let go of the yoke. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely unclip his harness. He turned to Harris. "Get the wounded out. I'll check the radio." He stumbled toward the back, passing through smoke and twisted metal. The bomb bay was torn open to the sky, sunlight pouring through holes in the skin. Somehow, against all logic, the central frame had held. The fortress was broken, but not destroyed. Outside, the sound of engines grew, the Mustangs circling overhead. Then, moments later, British rescue trucks appeared on the horizon, racing toward the crash site. When the first medics reached the bomber, they stopped and stared. "Bloody miracle," one of them whispered. "She's got no props. How the devil did she even make it this far?"
Callahan stepped down from the wreckage, limping, blood streaked across his face. He looked back at his ship, the battered, burned, half-dead beast that had carried them home. "She didn't die," he said simply. And then he collapsed onto the grass. The men were pulled from the wreck one by one, wrapped in blankets, given morphine and water. The medics counted 9 survivors, all battered but alive. The Mary Jane II had crossed hundreds of miles of enemy territory, fought through fire, flak, and death itself, and landed with not a single engine running. The newspapers would later call it impossible. Pilots would shake their heads and swear it couldn't be done. But the men who were there that day knew better. They knew that sometimes a machine becomes more than metal, that courage, will, and sheer defiance can keep even a dead plane in the air. As night fell over Dover, the wreck of the Mary Jane II sat silent and proud on the hillside, her wings still stretched as if she were ready for one last flight. And in the wind, the tattered flag painted on her nose, faded, scarred, and full of holes, fluttered stubbornly. She had refused to die. Morning came shrouded in mist. The cliffs of Dover gleamed pale against the dawn, and scattered across the grassy field lay the broken body of the Mary Jane II. She was a ruin. Her wings split, her skin burned, the once proud nose art half torn away. But she was there, and that fact alone defied everything anyone believed possible. Callahan woke in a field hospital tent, the smell of antiseptic and coffee thick in the air. His body ached in places he didn't know existed. His right hand was bandaged to the wrist, and every muscle screamed when he moved. The flap of the tent opened, and Harris appeared, his arm in a sling but grinning wide. "Morning, Skipper," he said. "You look like hell." Callahan managed a hoarse chuckle. "You should see the other guy." "Funny," Harris said, pulling up a chair. "The docs say you were lucky. Said if you'd blacked out even 10 seconds earlier, we'd have been fish food." Callahan looked past him toward the cliffs. Through the tent opening, he could just make out the jagged outline of the bomber resting in the field. "She wasn't ready to quit," he murmured. "Not her. Not that day." "Neither were we," Harris replied quietly. By noon, the crash site was crawling with officers, engineers, and journalists. Men in pressed uniforms circled direct, shaking their heads in disbelief. The damage was total. Structural ribs snapped, the tail assembly nearly vaporized, the wings torn open. Not a single engine could be salvaged. Yet the instruments showed that she had glided for almost 90 miles after the last one failed. Lieutenant Commander Hargrove from RAF Intelligence arrived first. He was a small man with sharp eyes and a sharper voice. "Captain Callahan," he said, stepping into the tent, "I have to be perfectly clear. No one in command believes a heavy bomber can glide that distance with that damage. I've seen the photographs. It shouldn't have been possible." Callahan met his gaze without flinching. "You calling me a liar, Commander?" Hargrove hesitated, then sighed. "No, I'm saying your plane broke every law of aerodynamics known to man." "Then maybe she rewrote them," Callahan said simply. Over the next few days, the crew was debriefed again and again. Each man told the same story: the flak over the Ruhr, the fighters, the failing engines, the impossible glide over the channel. Investigators tore the wreck apart, measuring angles, inspecting stress fractures, taking photographs. Every result came back the same: she shouldn't have flown. Yet she had. When the report was sent to Allied Command, one line from an RAF engineer became legend. It was as though the plane refused to accept that it was dead. The Mary Jane II became a pilgrimage site for airmen stationed nearby. Crews would visit before missions, running their hands along her battered fuselage for luck. They said she had the soul of every fortress that never came home. Mechanics would stand in silence before her, smoking their cigarettes, whispering, "That's what courage looks like in aluminum." For the men who'd flown her, life moved on, but something in them had changed. Sergeant Latham, the top turret gunner, spent weeks in recovery before returning to duty. When asked if he'd go up again, he laughed. "After that ride? Hell yes! There's not a German in the sky that scares me now." Wilcox, the tail gunner who'd been listed as killed in action, was later found, alive, barely, thrown free from the wreck mid-air and discovered in a hedgerow by farmers 3 miles from the crash. He'd broken both legs and an arm, but when he woke in the hospital, his first words were, "Did she make it?" When they told him yes, tears filled his eyes. "Knew she would," he whispered. "She always did." The newspapers caught the story within a week. Headlines screamed across England. "Ghost Fortress crosses with no engines. Crew lives." The B-17 that refused to die. Reporters came in droves, cameras flashing, sketch artists capturing the mangled wings, and the proud nose art of the pin-up girl still smiling through the soot. Callahan hated the attention, but stood for the photos anyway, for the men who hadn't made it back in other ships. When a correspondent from Stars and Stripes asked him how he managed it, he just said, "We didn't. She did." A week later, the U.S. Army Air Forces ordered the wreck disassembled and studied at Wright Field. But before they could move it, something strange happened. During the night, a heavy storm swept in from the channel. The wind screamed across the cliffs, waves hammering the shore. The guards at the site took shelter in their trucks. When dawn came, the Mary Jane II was gone. Not destroyed, gone. She hadn't rolled or slid, the ground showed no marks. Sections of the fuselage had been scattered miles away, as if something had lifted her and torn her apart in midair. Some said the storm had done it. Others swore they saw something else that night, a streak of light over the sea, like a winged shadow rising into the clouds. Officially, the Army declared it structural collapse due to weather exposure. Unofficially, no one believed that. Latham, visiting the site weeks later, stood at the cliff's edge, staring out at the empty sky. "She finally went home," he said softly. Callahan received orders to return to the States soon after. The war was turning, and new crews were replacing the old. But as he packed his duffel, he found himself unable to shake the feeling that the Mary Jane II wasn't gone, not really. One evening, before he shipped out, he walked alone down to the airfield. The sunset burned gold over the hangars, and the wind carried the faint scent of engine oil and sea salt. From the distance came the low hum of a B-17 on approach, a sound he'd heard 1,000 times before, yet this time it made his heart twist. He looked up, and for just a second, he thought he saw her. A dark silhouette gliding over the horizon, wings level, no sound of engines, drifting silently into the sun. Then she was gone. Callahan smiled faintly and saluted the empty sky. "You did good, girl," he whispered. "You did damn good." That night, when the pilots gathered at the mess, someone mentioned hearing a strange echo on the radio. A single transmission had come through, faint and full of static. A voice repeating, "Call sign Mary Jane 2, returning home." The signal faded before anyone could trace it. And so the legend began. From that day, bomber crews flying over the channel would sometimes report seeing a battered fortress drifting among the clouds, her engines silent, her lights dim. She never spoke, she never attacked. She only flew beside them for a while, steady and proud, before vanishing into the mist. The new boys called her Superstition. The old ones called her Guardian. To those who had been there, she was something else entirely. She was proof that courage doesn't rust, that loyalty outlives death, and that sometimes, Even when the engines are gone and the sky has turned against you, something deeper keeps you flying. The Mary Jane II wasn't a machine anymore. She was a promise. And she kept it.